20 years ago, there weren't any charter schools in Arkansas. There weren't any school choice programs for parents and students who wanted a better education for their children. And the idea that you could cut income tax and capital gains rates to spur economic growth was not a very popular idea. What a difference 20 years has made. Thank you, all of you, for your support. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the past, but we're going to focus on the future. The Policy Foundation was established in 1995 to encourage citizenship, to encourage a discussion about ideas, and to look towards the future to make Arkansas a better place. Ideas can be very abstract, but today I believe, after listening to some of the people whose lives have been affected by the ideas that we've championed for 20 years, you'll understand that ideas are really all about people. I'd like to begin our program by inviting a public official who has shown a great interest in ideas and policy to speak briefly about how he sees Arkansas and its future, and that's Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin.
Thank you, and thank you, Greg. Thank you for all the folks that are here, and congratulations to the Arkansas Policy Foundation. You know, there has been a lot of progress made, but there is still a critical role for the Policy Foundation to play, because despite all the progress, there's a long way to go on a lot of different fronts. And one that I want to talk briefly about, and I know the governor is coming, and I won't talk until he gets here because that would not be brief. He'll be here in a little bit. One of the areas that I'm really interested in, I think the governor's interested in, and the Policy Foundation is interested in, is the way our government functions, the way that our government is organized, the way that our government spends taxpayer dollars. That ought to be of interest to everybody. And if you want to know how the government spends your money and more about this particular issue, just buy a newspaper just about any day of the week, and you can see what's going on, at least some of it, inside government. And you know, one of the things that I've thought a lot about, and I think this is an area where really I think we should lean on the Policy Foundation to do research and produce great papers, and that is how the issues of tax reform and government reorganization interplay. And you know, I've thought a lot about this. And the thing that most folks talk about when they talk about government reform, in my experience, the number one thing is tax reform, right? If you talk to folks about what they'd like to do to get the economy going, about what they'd like to do to change government, what they'd like to do for growth, it's tax reform. And I'm a huge believer in tax reform. In fact, I'm such a big believer in tax reform, I don't believe that you tweak the code. I believe you throw it away. You start with a white sheet of paper, blank sheet of paper, and you make the tax provisions earn their way onto that paper, one provision at a time. So what I've concluded is the only way to truly get bold tax reform and regulatory reform and the kind of reform that will help this state grow, with number one in the country for job growth as our goal. Not 35, not 33, not 28, but number one as our goal. The only way that we could get there is to first look at what we're spending and why we're spending it. What does that mean? That means we truly need to ask every single state agency, board, commission, department, the same questions that we ought to be asking all the ones in Washington, and I tried when I was there. and that is, what is your mission? What are you doing that is inconsistent with your mission? What are you not doing that your mission demands? What do you do well? What do you do poorly? How can you do it better? And how about this one? If your agency or department was started today, what would it look like? Would it look anything like the one that we currently have? I submit to you that an agency that was started 30, 40, 50 years ago most likely wouldn't look the same if it were created today. If it would look the same, then there's a problem. So, what's the point of all this? The Policy Foundation is a critical resource, and they can be a critical resource for the type of research that can fuel this sort of reform. And make no mistake, this is not easy reform. It's tough, and it's going to take a long time. But I'll tell you, we owe it. I owe it to my 5-year-old and 8-year-old. I owe it to them. We owe it to our kids, grandkids. One day my kids may not want to live near Daddy, but I don't want them to be unable to live near Daddy because there are no jobs. If they decide to go somewhere else because they just want to, okay, that's their choice. But I don't want them to say, Daddy, I'd love to live near you, but the opportunity's just not there. So let's go bold or go home. And thank you to the Policy Foundation for supporting those sorts of efforts. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everybody. You know, I'm reminded of something my father always said. There's really 3 things in life that are, if not impossible, very difficult to do. You know, one is to climb a fence leaning towards you. The other is to kiss somebody leaning away from you. I think this what just went off. Talk without a microphone, maybe one of them. And the other is to introduce somebody that doesn't need an introduction. And of course, ASA needs no introduction in the state of Arkansas at all. And so I had this really great introduction all written out, so I think I'll just wing it. You know, during the Murphy Commission era 20 years ago, the one thing that I did learn was that competency trumps ideology. And I probably shouldn't use the word Trump, I guess. So transcends ideology. And we in Arkansas are so very fortunate to have Asa Hutchinson in the governor's office because he is the embodiment of competency and intelligence and thoughtfulness. And I just really think that Arkansas is on the verge of really great things given the leadership that Asa brings to the governor's office and exhibits and the thoughtful approach to things and the people that he's assembled. You just heard the lieutenant governor. And what a remarkable group of elected officials we have in the state of Arkansas. And I'm just struck by how fortunate we are. And we are, in fact, the state of opportunity. And we have leadership at long last in this state capable of leading us really into what I would consider a fighting fit competitive state for job creation, education, quality of life, and all the things that matter in whether we as Arkansans bring jobs here, keep them here, or take them someplace else. Because in my experience, it really boils down to 4 things. And it's education, the quality thereof, and can you get an educated workforce and have a world-class education for your children and your employees' children. It's relative tax rates, it's infrastructure, and quality of life. And of course, quality of life is a rather omnibus term, which probably has to include health care. But those are the 4 things that, to me, are job creators, are destructors, are move jobs. And so I'm thrilled to be an Arkansan and to be the beneficiary of this kind of leadership at long last. So with that, our governor, Asa Hutchinson.
Thank you. Thank you. Madison, thank you for your longtime friendship and leadership here in the state of Arkansas, from service in many different positions of government, including the Highway Commission, to supporting the Arkansas Policy Foundation. Your generosity and support for these endeavors has made a real difference in state government. The Arkansas Policy Foundation has been a leader in pro-growth economic policies, lower taxes, competitive tax rates, efficiency in government, and their service in 20 years should be recognized today as well. And as you know, I have expressed an interest in efficiency in government. I've talked about this during the campaign. We've had special legislative initiatives in that regard. We've worked with some of the legislators that are here on efficiency matters. I've tried to coach a very willing leadership team and my cabinet officials to look at efficiencies within their organizations, and we've done pretty well. But at the same time, if you want to talk efficiency, you have to start with the historic report of the Murphy Commission back in late 1990s that was really the hallmark of efficiency in terms of private sector recommendations on what needs to be done in state government. A number of changes were made as a result of that historic commission. Some of the things were not accomplished. Madison, I hope you weren't offended by this, but probably some of the things shouldn't have been accomplished. I mean, and that's usually, because there's a difference between private sector and government sometimes. But the ideas that were presented were foundational in the direction that we need to go. And so while we have done a great deal, and I'll articulate a couple of those here in a minute, it's important to recognize the role of the private sector and organizations like the Arkansas Policy Foundation that can create a new generation of ideas and efficiency in state government. How can we best deliver services for the taxpayers in the most cost-efficient manner? That is the objective. It's not cost savings at any measure. It is effective delivery of services in the most cost-efficient manner. And so I'm delighted to announce today a partnership with the Arkansas Policy Foundation, in which the Arkansas Policy Foundation is initiating a state government efficiency project, which will renew a review of our state agencies that will make a report and recommendations on efficiency efforts that the legislature that's here and myself as governor can consider. And I'm delighted with the willingness of the Arkansas Policy Foundation to take on this project. As a result of their commitment to reviewing the efficiencies in state government, I have issued today a memorandum to all of my agency directors asking them to cooperate and support and provide information as needed to the Arkansas Policy Foundation for them to do the analysis necessary to make the report, to make the recommendations on improved efficiencies in Arkansas. Now, I'll come back, since I offended Madison, I'll offend everybody again. I actually expect the report to come back with 2/3 of the items are items that we ought to do. Maybe 1/3 of them are things that we can politically do. And maybe 1/3 will be ideas that really are not right for this time. And so it doesn't mean that all of the ideas that will be presented will be adopted, but it means that all of the ideas that are presented should be considered, and many of them will be adopted. And so I'm anxious for this project. I asked Vu Ritchie, where's Vu, who's my deputy counsel, if he would, from the governor's office, work and be the guiding light to the agencies as they work with the Arkansas Policy Foundation as questions come up. Someone very astute in the media say, why did you pick a lawyer to be your staff person on that? It's because he's good. and because he understands efficiency and the importance of it with our agencies. There's some things that state government is good at, some things that state government is absolutely essential in, and there's some things that the private sector is really good at as well. You got to know where the difference is. And as governor, we have done a great job in terms of looking at efficiencies thus far in state government. But we need the look of the private sector that comes in and takes a fresh look, a new approach, and looks at state government and says, there's more that can be done. Here's some ideas. These are things we might do in the private sector. These are things that you ought to consider. These are some best practices. That's the kind of review we need, and I'm grateful for the Policy Foundation that's willing to take on that project. I mentioned that we've done some efforts. We put in a hiring freeze that resulted in 6 months and $2.5 million in savings, 300 fewer state employees. We've reorganized 4 state agencies that over 10 years will be a $25 million savings. I've adopted the philosophy that small things can matter. And whenever you look at savings in state government or savings in the private sector, it's the pennies that matter that make the profit margin. We need to have that view in state government. And so while I'm concentrating on economic development in this state, while the Lieutenant Governor is working very hard in partnership with me in all of these projects, really from economic development to efficiency in government, the partnership that we have with the Arkansas Policy Foundation will be very helpful to the mission that we want to accomplish as a state in growing our economy, in making sure that we can concentrate on tax cuts and having competitive tax cuts in the state, that we can concentrate on computer science education that we're leading the nation on, improving education and the quality of life in this state. But it starts with the efficient delivery of services to the citizens of this state in a cost-efficient manner. That's what I'm committed to do, and I'm delighted that the Arkansas Policy Foundation shares that. And I look around this room, I want to thank all of the supporters of the Policy Foundation, the board members, those that have been there every step of the way. Congratulations on your effort through the years, through 20 years, and for your willingness to take on this next project. Thank you very much.